Welcome to We Don't Owe You Shit with me, Caden Coleman. Make sure to follow, like, and subscribe to this podcast. And leave a comment, damn it. I want to know what you think. Welcome to We Don't Owe You Shit with me, Caden Coleman. I don't know why I do that like I don't have an intro. This week, we have a guest. I'm going to introduce him in a second. But before that, I did let you guys know that if you left a comment on any of the previous episodes, that I would be shouting people out. So this week, I'm going to shout out Nai, whose comment said, "It was fire, as always." Thank you, Nai. And then we got Angel, who said, "I learned so much during this episode." So thank you so much. If you would like a shout out, please feel free to connect, comment, like, share, all the good stuff to this episode or whichever episode, all of the episodes. Actually, go binge watch every episode, even if you've already seen them again. Before. Watch them again. You know where I'm going with this. Okay, so let's get on with the episode. Today I have Casey with me, and I'm going to let you introduce yourself.
All right, my name's Casey. I use he, him pronouns. I'm also a trans man. I was born and raised in Houston, Texas. Spent the last 5 years in Austin, now currently living about 2 hours outside of Chicago in the Midwest. I'm also a queer business owner. I own Queer Traditions. Got our logo tee here. And it's a queer-driven business, so I seek and pay queer artists from all over the country to design T-shirts for me. And then
Sorry. Go ahead.
I pay them a commission based on the T-shirt sales as a way to help build passive income, build their personal businesses. Should we try that again?
No, go ahead. Just go ahead. Things happen. We rolling in real time. Okay, Siri felt like she had something to say. But go ahead.
So, Queer Traditions is a queer-driven business. I hire queer artists to help build their own brands. I pay them a commission based on their T-shirt sales, and I market them on social media as just a way to pay queer people for their art and allow them to express themselves as authentically as they want, and try to stop this rainbow capitalism stuff that we've been experiencing in the last few years. Mm-hmm. Really forever, honestly.
Yes, right. For the last few years. All of the years, you mean?
Yeah.
Okay. That's what's up. So, the way Casey came to be here is that Casey reached out to me and paid me for a one-on-one consultation to unlearn or to begin to unlearn some of his privilege and anti-blackness and learn about some anti-racism, and we got into some really good conversations that, we were like, hey, this would be good for the podcast. And it just so happened that he's in town, and so
we just flown in.
Yeah, I literally just picked him up from the airport. So I'm super excited that he's here. We're going to touch on a few different things today, so, be ready. This might make some people uncomfortable, but we're going to talk about it, and I'm not going to offer an explanation as to why, because we don't owe you shit. Okay, so let's start at the very beginning. We're clearly battling the leaf blower man, and I think he's taunting me because I went out there and I only asked him, how long is it going to be? And he said 5 minutes, but I feel like he just came to my front door
being real petty
with the leaf blower. But you know what? It's all right. So, like I was saying, what we're going to do now is we're going to re-record what we've already said. So whatever. Y'all will be all right. Okay, so we're starting from the very beginning. So the question is, what was it like for you when you decided to transition? We'll start there.
Okay. So when I decided to transition, I was 16. I had already been doing research on trans people and the transgender experience for maybe 2 years before that. I came out to my friends first, the partner I was with at the time, and my parents. All were very supportive, didn't have any issues really. My parents were supportive. My mom said, "Do you think I want a living son or a dead daughter?" And from there, her and my stepdad made every effort that they could to get me in therapy and help me move forward with that process, until we realized that there was no way I was going to get on hormones in time to be before I was 18 anyways. So we kind of just let the therapy thing ride, and I learned how to socially transition. I learned how to cope with dysphoria, knowing I wasn't going to get on hormones for another 2 years. I learned how to have uncomfortable conversations with family, friends that asked uncomfortable questions and things. And then they also, taught me how to deal with transphobes and bigots and how to deal with that. And also told me, with this experience that you have, not everyone's going to like you. Not everyone is going to accept you, or respect you. And some of them may be violent. They prepared me for all that, and I had an amazing, trans specialist who dedicated a lot of her life to helping other trans people, and she was cis. She was a cis woman.
That's nice. That's dope.
And so she even told me, like, you're white and you're a white man, and you are gonna have it a lot easier than a lot of other trans people. And I was only 16 at the time, and I still had so much more to learn after.
Yeah, of course.
But due to the people I grew up around, my family, friends. As far as like passing goes, you didn't even ask me that one yet, did you?
No, but we can jump right into that. Did you have any certain ideas of what you had to be like in order to pass?
Yeah, so as far as passing, I really only had very straight cis idols to look up to when I was growing up. The men surrounding me were all very masculine, some toxic, some not. Even the ones who weren't toxic, though, still, a lot of belief systems around what women do, what men do, gender roles, things like that.
Massage.
So I really didn't think I would fit into, the male world unless I, embodied some of that masculinity.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, and so I did turn into a toxic, masculine individual for many years in my early transition, especially because I was angry, angsty, anxious, all of it. It was a perfect way to just project all my stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I get that 1,000%. A lot of people see me in this space, right? And they think, gosh, Caden's such a gem. Oh, baby, I used to be toxic, masculine energy as well. I used to be that person, because, again, I've been transitioning for 15 years. And 15 years ago, we had, like, genderqueer, gender fluid, androgynous. Nobody was really talking about non-binary, especially not amongst black people, which is what I'm immersed in, obviously, right? And so when I started hearing about non-binary people or like trans-masculine people who still identify as lesbian, I had a lot to say, and it wasn't good stuff, and I did talk about how I thought that I had to be more on the masculine side, and I thought I had to date women in order to pass. And it's so funny looking back, like, what the? What?
I was the same way, yeah.
And a lot of my toxic masculinity did not come from my family and stuff like that. It came from other trans men telling me that, I'll never forget it as long as I live. When I transitioned, I had moved down to Atlanta, Georgia I was living right outside of D.C. in...
How old were you?
Jesus, how old am I now? 36. I was like 21-ish. And I moved down there because my best friend is a trans man. And when I moved down there, we were best friends, so we spent all our time together. And we were in Walmart one day. And I was standing there, and my hands were on my hips. And he goes, "Get your hands off your hips. Men don't stand like that." And that stuck with me so heavy. And now, years later, I still don't put my hands on my hips for real. Like, I still think about it, even though I'm super comfortable in my femininity and my masculinity and how I present myself. And as you can see, I'm talking with my hands. It's just how I am as a person. Well, if you're watching, if you're just listening, you can't see that. But, it's so crazy how deeply, like, how in the trenches you can be and not even really recognize it. That same best friend of mine is now a gay trans man.
You're like, don't put your hands on your hips.
Don't you dare.
Don't do it. Don't let me get you.
Dare put your hands on your hips now. But, it took him a while because we're told that as trans men, we have to be a certain type of way. So that kind of makes me want to kind of segue into like your experiences within the community as far as like toxic masculinity goes, right? So like, I think my goal here is I want to like hear your perspective of like what your encounters with other trans men were, or even cis men, is early on in transition or even now today, and like see how that compares to mine, because I often talk about how so many people think that trans men, I'm using trans men specifically because a lot of people don't consider trans masculine people.
Yeah.
So a lot of the pressure, if you will, is on trans men specifically, right? I always talk about how people think that trans men are like this monolith, and we're all the same regardless of sexuality, regardless of, you know, our skin color and ethnicities and things of that nature. And I always talk about how the experience of black trans men is so different than that of white trans men. So what has your experience been like? Like, even if you have like examples of how you've experienced toxic masculinity, or maybe how you've conveyed it.
Yeah, I can get both. Right. You know, early on, I would say I was the one projecting toxic masculinity, mainly from reflecting other men that I was interacting with at the time, whether it was the dudes in high school, or my, you know, the parents in my life, the family in my life, the dudes I was interacting with just at the stores and stuff. I would see, you know, men treating women poorly, or talking very openly about, you know, hate speech about others, and just very much conviction in their voice and the things that they would say. So for a long time, I was very toxic masculine. The people I dated, at the time was only dating cis women, and I would tell them what to wear. Women? Some of them yes, some of them no. But I, you know, would get in this space where I would tell them who to talk to, what to wear, that kind of stuff. Like, I was that guy, you know, and it was really cringe. And eventually it became objectionable to them, to me, and I started really reflecting on the way I was treating them. But as far as my interactions with toxic masculinity, I mean, I've seen it growing up, like, very closely in my family dynamics, but I also projected a lot of that, and once I found it objectionable, the only way I was able to unlearn it was admitting it and really looking at it. So now a lot of my interactions with toxic masculinity is either when I feel the belief systems coming back up in me and I have to look at that, or my interactions with white cis straight men currently. And I do think the political climate now has kind of forced us, and you know, men have to be in one box or the other. If you're not hypermasculine, you're weak. You know, if you're not hypermasculine, you're, you know, gay, or seen as feminine, or seen as less than, right?
Right. And if you're not hypermasculine, then you are a part of the reason why people don't respect trans men.
And especially as a, you know, a white man, like they're really expecting me, when they, especially people who meet me who have no clue I'm trans, they're expecting me to show up as this cis straight guy, you know. And so sometimes I still feel in fear of a situation that might become awkward if I were to convey that I'm queer in any way. I will find myself being more masculine than I usually am, you know, because I'm dealing with a customer, because I'm a bartender as well, by the way, so I usually interact with, you know, a lot of straight people and a lot of straight couples, and I hear a lot of things that I, you know, would not hear if people knew that they were being served by a trans person. You know?
I always talk about that, and we can definitely delve into that. But before we do, I want to hear about community, other trans men. Have you experienced toxic masculinity from other trans men?
Yeah.
Or have you been on the other side of expecting a certain type of masculinity for a trans man to be considered a man and things of that nature?
Yeah, so actually, like, a perfect example of me exhibiting toxic masculinity, you know, I remember fun fact, everybody, when I was like 17, my mom took me to a trans support group that Caden was at, and I found you on YouTube, and I watched a bunch of your videos. It was right whenever you had your first daughter, and you were still with your ex-husband, and you guys were very open about your relationship. That was the first time I'd ever seen a trans man even like a man. So I was just like mind blown, and that was the first time I was like, wait.
Like is a strong, no, I'm just kidding.
I'm like, I know you hate men, but you love to hate them.
Yeah, right.
And so I was like, that was my first experience really seeing a trans man with another man, and I was like, not only is he with a man, he's with a cis man, and he is like totally himself, right? And totally in his authenticity, and I was like, that is being a man. It's just being you, and that's it. And so I started to kind of break down my own toxic belief systems just from the feeling I got of like, how did he get there, right? Like, because my confusion of it could have easily been seen as me not liking it or not approving of it. You know, I was like, how does this work? How does that happen? Same thing with me with non-binary people, like you said. You know, I had the same experience where I was like,
what do you mean you're in?
What do you mean? And I had to have people explain it to me. Same thing with, I had to start, I didn't really meet another trans person until, you know, I had came out and started my hormones. I had a few other friends that were in my age group that, you know, decided to transition around the same time. That was my only experience with trans men, you know, on a big level up until I, you know, turned 21 and was able to go to gay bars and stuff like that. I had not ever really seen any trans people. I didn't even see a trans woman for the first time until I was probably 18. Like, you know, like not even in person, you know. Aside from the trans kids support group that I would go to at the Montrose Center, I would see trans people there, but in my day-to-day life, going out without intentionally seeking them out, I didn't. So I really just only had cis men to model myself from, you know, or try to figure out manhood.
Which, I mean, listen, we keep it candid here. Most cis men aren't what you want to model yourself after. And that's not an attack on cis men, it's an attack on how society tells people to raise cis men. You know what I mean? And it'll make you go back on what you know is right to try to be seen as, you know, passable or whatever the case may be. And for me, like, I witnessed a ton of toxic masculinity. I actually would say that my father has no toxic masculinity in him at all. My father has always been one of the most, like, gentle, like, you know, respects women, you know. He's very, I always call him like an alpha male, but just in the sense of like, no, you're not mowing the lawn, I'm gonna mow the lawn. Like, even though I just work 2 jobs and, you know, the wife stays home and you know, he's that. But he doesn't enforce that. It's just how the role that he fell into.
It was just a gentle way.
Exactly.
I think that's amazing. I think that's a great model of manhood. You know?
Yes, and he was always able to show affection and everything to both myself and my brother growing up. So it's not like he felt like boys should be tough and girls should be, you know, coddled. We were both coddled by my father, you know.
Well, and that's the thing too that I feel like a lot of people aren't understanding is like, we're not trying to get everyone to break out of gender roles. There really is nothing wrong with living in your gender role if you identify with it, as long as we allow them to live in that gender, right? Live in their experience and be that, right? Like, I think everyone thinks we want people to come outside of their gender identity.
We want everybody to be non-binary.
No,
like, relax.
Just, but there's nothing wrong with gender roles, but just be who you are and allow other people to do the same and believe them. Right? Like,
exactly. And so for me, toxic masculinity really showed up after I, you know, started transitioning. And what like I said, it came from other trans men and being told what I could do, how I was supposed to act, and I was modeling myself after, instead of cis men, I was modeling myself after the older trans men, right? The people who had been transitioning before me, like Marquise Filson. I don't know if you know any of these people, but like, I was also in ballroom, so that's who I saw. And in ballroom, you have to be masculine and a thug, and you're supposed to date women, and
now I see trans men being more toxic, you know, when they're not super familiar with queer spaces. I see a lot of trans men who don't really do a lot of community interactions or work or anything. They are usually the ones that, you know, I've had in my experience, you know, say things like, oh, trans men shouldn't date men, trans men shouldn't get pregnant.
And that's exactly what I was about to get into. What ended up happening is I realized that the further I got into my transition, the more I would look in the mirror and be like, there you are. I was also like, who am I? And I was dating women and all that good stuff. And, you know, I started realizing like, well, I knew I was attracted to men. Let's be clear. But I felt like as a masculine presenting person, and then now somebody who identifies as a man, I'm not supposed to date men. But after a while, I was like, that's stupid. Gay men exist. So I started dating men, and I don't know why, but I thought there was like a hierarchy. So I started with like trans men first, as though I had to like gateway drug my way in.
You're like,
I don't
I
know
gotta
what that
work
was
my way
about.
up.
And then
like I'm gonna fuck my way to the
right,
top.
I'm gonna fuck my way straight up into the right dick. And what happened was I was dating this stud, if you will, and I was letting her know my feelings and all that. And her whole thing, she wanted us to be together, period. She was like, as long as you can go have sex with them, as long as you come home to me. And I was like, you're not understanding
Hey,
what
y'all,
I'm saying.
don't be fooled. Kaden got girlfriends.
I do not. I do not.
And his DMs, though.
That might be true, but that ain't got nothing to do with me. And what ended up happening is my mother was driving through Georgia, and she was like, I'm getting married in 2 weeks, you should come up with me to Philly. And I was like, okay. And so I got to Philly, and Philly was the first place I went where there was like a neighborhood, and I was like, what is this sorcery? Wow. I got outside, and there were just gays and theys and all types of stuff, and I lost it. I lost it.
Yeah.
I was doing all types of, oh goodness, good times. Anyway, so that's when I realized, like, okay, I don't have to date women. But also in Philly, there's more of a ballroom scene, right? And so there were a lot more trans men up there. And I came out as gay. I came out as gay on social media. I came out as gay.
What was
like,
that experience like?
I'm about to get into it. So nobody really said anything straight to me, but there were a lot of subliminal messages saying from trans men saying, so why didn't you just stay a fucking girl? And, this is what's wrong with the trans community. This is why they don't respect us. Now, we weren't using words like cis. This is why bio men and bio women don't respect us. And I'm just like,
I've heard that forever. Bio men.
Bio.
I know.
I get it all the time on TikTok, so I'm used to it. And I was just like sticking to my gun. So again, I'm in the ballroom scene. So I'm trying to walk these balls, and the funniest thing, it's so funny how life comes full circle. Remember, I was just telling you, I forgot that I have friends that work in nonprofits. The person who I was talking about, his name is Sean Coleman, ironically, right? But he goes by Sean Ebony in the ballroom scene. And I walked the ball, this was so long ago. I walked the ball, and I was at the back of the runway, and there was another trans man that was also in my same house that was walking, but he was light-skinned. From far away, looked like it could have been me. He chopped him and then chopped me, meaning that we didn't even get to compete, right? And I found out that he chopped him because he thought it was me, and then he chopped me because he thought that basically the way he saw it was because I was gay, I wasn't a real man. And so I couldn't be real. And realness in the ballroom scene means that you're like cis-assumed and passing as a straight man, right? Which doesn't make sense, but whatever. He has since apologized, and obviously we're cool. But that was like one of my first like slaps in the face of like, oh, y'all are serious. Like y'all are dead ass. And then after that, a group of trans men wanted to jump me in Philly just because I was openly gay. No other reason. A lot of them have since come to me and apologized and were like, I don't even know why I felt that way. You know what I mean? But
some of them probably like boys too.
I wasn't gonna get into that, but that's usually, I mean,
that's
honestly,
what happened with me. I used to project that kind of stuff too. I maybe have not been so open or didn't try to hurt anyone over it, but I still projected that belief system.
A lot, and that's why so many gay people will say, like, DL man, he's probably DL because he's fighting his own demons. It's not trying to be funny. It's because that's what our experience is. Just about everyone that has really projected something like that on me has also tried to hit on me or apologized to me and then went on to date men or at least be open to dating men or at least are on Jacked and Grindr
talking, chatting, sending nudes,
getting bent over.
Yeah.
Oh, so you doing the bending? So and then don't even get me started on when I was pregnant and navigating that, and after I had my baby, and I was what was wrong with the community, and people talked about me like a fucking dog, like a dog, and all of that experience shaped me in such a way to where it was like I could never ever go back to that toxic masculinity. So I started to look inward. And honestly, one of the biggest things, you would think that like coming out as gay and all that would have taught me to look inward. I was gay and still still being toxic. It wasn't until I gave birth to my oldest daughter and I was like, oh shit, I have a girl.
Yeah.
And I had to think about the fact that I don't sexualize my kids, so I don't worry about like what's going to happen when they're dating and stuff like that. Like I don't even consider stuff like that. But I did think to myself, now what if anyone came into their lives with the same thought process as you? Right? And I was like, I would have to off them or something. Like, you got me fucked up. You're not about to be bringing that shit around my daughter, telling her what she can and can't wear and all that other bullshit. Fuck out of here.
Yeah.
I get mad when women do that. Oh, she's cute, but why does she have on a crop top? Mind your business. Because she can. That's for adults. That's funny because it's in children's sizes. So what are you talking about? So I had to unlearn a lot of that toxicity that I have. And I realize now, especially with her being 9, that the world is trying to teach her how to hate herself.
Yes.
We were walking into a Chinese restaurant a few days ago. She goes, yeah, I was going to try this diet. I said, diet? You're 9 years old. What are you talking about? You don't even know damn diet. And this is what they're teaching our kids. And all of that comes from, that's toxic masculinity and how women should look and girls should look and and I'm just like reeling every day trying to make sure that I am not exuding anything of the like. And I know damn well her other dad isn't, because he's based on
all that is from white supremacy and colonialism.
All of it. Like all of it. All of it. So here's a question for you really quick. This is just like your own personal opinion type thing. Do you think that trans masculine people can be misogynistic in the same way as cisgender men can?
Yes. Period. Because I've done it fully. Yeah.
I asked that question because a lot of the times trans masculine people will hide behind the fact that they were once, oh well, I used to be a girl, so I can't. Yes, you can, right? Because once you begin identifying as a man, whether you pass or not, you still have some level of privilege.
Yes.
Even masculine presenting women tend to have more respect and privilege than feminine presenting women do. So we know these roles and these rules, these unwritten rules are true. And you being born a certain way does not absolve you from being able to project a certain type of discrimination or unconscious bias or whatever, right?
Yeah.
And I just want people to understand that, like, I honestly feel as though, like, a cisgender woman can definitely practice misogyny, right? But it would never be in the same way as cisgender men, because they are just the oppressing, which is like a defense mechanism, but they don't have the power for it to matter, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like, you can hurt somebody's feelings, but you don't have the power to oppress, your fellow.
I can, because I get to go to a store and I'm assumed to be white cis man, and I'm just perceived as that in the day-to-day world. No one even knows I'm trans unless they find me on social media.
Right.
So I was fully able to use that privilege and project my misogyny on women, and did for a long time. I thought for a long time, like, I was gonna meet a girl and she was gonna have the baby and I was gonna work and she was gonna stay home, that kind of thing. Like, I fully saw that for myself at 16, 17 years old, because I just thought this is the only way I can be a man, and I had to unlearn that.
Yeah, I get that.
Yeah.
I never wanted kids, ever. I wasn't thinking about no damn kids at 16. Now
You're
I
like,
got
whoops.
Whoopsie! That's what happens when you have sex.
Yeah.
So this is a perfect segue. You saw yourself with the wife and kids and all that other beautiful white picket fence, all the quote unquote American gene. And now if y'all aren't watching the video, I'm sorry for you, but this man is fine. And also pansexual, which I gagged. I gagged when he told me because, again, just based off of the things that are ingrained in us, we're going to assume that someone who's, tatted up with a beard, deep ass voice. I feel like I gotta talk like this around him. You would just be like, oh, he likes girls. And then he was like, no, I'm pansexual. Wait a minute. No, you're not. So did you encounter any backlash when you came out? This is an important question and you'll know why.
Yeah. So
did I make you blush? Oh,
yeah.
You
Well, I'm blushing because you're about to laugh.
Okay.
So I still haven't even told my parents I'm pansexual. So sorry if you're listening to this.
Hey, Mom and Dad.
Surprise, love all humans. They're all great. But yeah, so I actually have only really came out to friends, and the only reason I really haven't told my parents is just there was no real opportunity to talk about it. We haven't talked about my sex life in forever. I was in a committed relationship for the last 2 years that ended in a few months back, maybe in May. So I was in a committed monogamous relationship, but it was with a trans woman who was a person of color as well. So my parents got to learn a lot about that because they had never even really met a trans woman. They had seen them and shaken their hands, but never gotten to know and heard personal experiences of a trans woman, or even a trans person of a different experience of that than a trans man. They've only ever really been around trans men on a personal level. Yeah. So, but yeah, as far as coming out as pansexual, my friends, there were trans men that I know just through social media that, if I had mentioned, being pansexual on there, that they've been like, oh my God, you're gay, you're not pansexual, you're gay. And I'm like,
what?
It's this whole you can't be male and bi without being gay.
And right? I was gonna bring up, I don't know if you've ever seen the show Heartstopper on Netflix. Oh, please watch it. And Netflix sponsor me, girl. But there's a show on Netflix. It's called Heartstopper, and it's based in the UK, and it's so freaking adorable. And the first season was about this boy. They're in high school, and they're in this all-boys school, and he's the only openly gay one there, and he's navigating that. Then a new boy comes, and the new boy is straight, or so he thought, and they end up, having fireworks and stuff, and then the new boy comes out as bisexual, and that's kind of how it ends. The second season just came out. I binge watched it in one day, and most of it was about him coming out, the new boy. And he was struggling so hard, and everybody who cared about him in his life, including his boyfriend, kept saying the coming out it's really not necessary. You don't owe anybody that information. He was more concerned with coming out because he didn't want to have to hide his relationship. But his mom kept saying yo, you don't have to tell your dad, because his dad was some shitty, toxic masculinity, kind of guy. And she was like, you don't owe him shit. You don't owe anyone anything. And he had this fear of being bullied. And as soon as he actually announced that they were boyfriends, he did it on Instagram, and he announced that they were boyfriend, and everybody was like, "Oh, he's gay." But he had put, "I'm bi," because he wasn't gay; he was bi. And everybody, there was this. They didn't make a big overt scene about it, to where if you're not even queer, you probably wouldn't even have noticed it, right? Yeah. But everybody was he would be they'd be you're bi, and they'd be like, oh, okay, so when were you going to tell me you were gay? And they would completely skip over the bi part. Yeah. And I noticed that only happens with men or male-identified people. Women can be bi, men cannot.
Yeah, it's so strange.
It's you either love dick or you don't. There's no in between.
It's just you cannot. It's so strange, and I really have only realized my own pansexuality 3 years ago, whenever, so 2020 maybe, and I only had very few, I have to this day only had very few interactions of any kind with men, whether that be going on a date or having a sexual encounter. I've only done that maybe 4 times in total, because it's always with cis men, and I always run into, you'll never be a man with that pussy. They get all mad as soon as you are direct, as soon as you set a boundary, they're transphobic, and they exhibit their transphobia.
Because that's their defense mechanism. and that's why I hate that I love men. I did identify as pansexual when I first came out. And then I had to really accept the fact that I'm not interested in dating women. And, you know, for a long time, like, trans women would hit on me and say, well, I still have the thing you like. And I'm like, but ma'am, you're still a woman. Like, sexuality is not an attraction to genitals. It's an attraction to the person, and then the genitals are like a bonus. You know what I mean?
Well, and that's what I really appreciated about my first girlfriend whenever I came out. She was like a gold star lesbian at the time. And as soon as I came out as a trans man, she was like, I don't want to break your heart and I don't want to hurt you, but if you truly are male, I like girls.
And
like, I can only be with women.
I think that's dope.
I was heartbroken, but we totally understood each other.
Yeah, that makes sense because I had that experience too, as a quote unquote lesbian. God, I was a horrible lesbian. But as a quote unquote lesbian, you know, people making an excuse like, well, you still have a vagina, so technically, and it's like, no, girl, like, what? And then, like, when you're in social circles, because we know how serious lesbians take their lesbianism, and I understand it, because as women, you're already always spoken over, and you're assumed to be heterosexual, especially if you're not masculine presenting, and so you have to, like, adorn your sexuality on your sleeve so that people will leave you the fuck alone. I get that, but you would have people, like, you would go into, like, a party, and they'd be like, hi, you know, this is my boyfriend, and then they'd be like, but don't worry, he's trans. And it's like,
excuse me?
Well, goddamn.
Yeah.
But it's like I get a pass. I'm still pretty much a lesbian kind of thing, and that's not cool.
That's disrespectful.
All the lesbians listening, stop doing that.
Yeah.
Stop doing that. That's weird. So I definitely want to talk. I feel like we've had great conversations about toxic masculinity and sexuality and all that good shit. And now I kind of want to get into, like, the heavy.
The stuff that's really going to make
real
people
shit.
uncomfortable.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the biggest thing is anti-blackness in the trans community and in the queer community. So I remember you saying that you've had encounters, I won't say the familial relationship, that's up to you, with people who are straight up white supremacists and things of that nature. And we're often taught that, like, we're a product of our environment, we're a product of who's around us. It sounds to me like you grew up in a predominantly white space. Conservative, yeah.
Never really religious, and it really didn't. I wouldn't even say, like, my parents really didn't start expressing political views at all. It was always never talk about religion, never talk about politics until Donald Trump ran.
Understood.
And then it was a topic of conversation at everyone's dinner table, you know, so...
Well, not us.
Yeah, not ours.
We were just like, this fucking orange, man.
Trying to figure out how to get him out.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, are we leaving the country? What are we about to do? But, so, what has your experience been with navigating spaces as a white person? When did you start recognizing, like, your privilege? And... I'll stop there. I'll just go with
So I used to work in mental health for a little while. So I, first and foremost, got a lot of interactions with, it was a rehabilitation center where people could pay either insurance or private pay, and every private pay person was white. All the clients that they were willing to, keep and everything like that, it was always, usually white. And was it the facility or was it the lack of resources for the people of color, right? Like, that's where I was like, I don't think it's necessarily these people not wanting to help these people. It's like, people of color do not have the same money, resources, health insurance, like health benefits,
right.
So I really started putting the pieces together with that. It was a queer-friendly space, so we interacted a lot with non-binary people, a lot with the trans community. So I met, trans people of all different intersectionalities, and I really got to see, even with me, my family is amazing, but they have not been perfect, and I've had my struggles with transphobia, but only within dynamics of friendships or maybe a few people in my family who knew me pre-transition and couldn't let go of that idea of me, right? But I saw firsthand how these people didn't even have the baseline of love coming from their family. They didn't even have their parents saying that they loved them or even willing to try. My family just had to unlearn a lot of stuff and still does, just like I do. We all have to unlearn. That's what the whole thing that I had to learn about anti-blackness and racism was because of me growing up in a white family and going to the schools that I went to, knowing that they didn't teach me the right history. I was racist. I had to get clear on that.
Right.
Even if I wasn't doing it in a violent or harmful way, I still had to get clear that those belief systems were instilled in me.
Exactly.
You know, and I saw how I would, you know, think certain stereotypes if I saw people do something because that's what I was taught.
Exactly.
You know? And then I had to start seeing like, oh, they're doing those things for certain reasons, or it's stuff that's happened just over history. It's carried on generation after generation, and this is where that community is at. You know, and I had to get really clear on that, or else I would have never learned how to start to improve.
Yeah,
so.
I love that you brought up the family thing, because that's the reason why I asked you about your experience as you began your transition. Because I've noticed that, you know, as a majority, like of course. We all in the trans community, when we transition, a lot of us, a vast majority of us lose family.
Yep.
People start disowning us, all that good stuff. What I've noticed, however, is people from white families tend to have more supportive parents. Of course, there are people who have just shitty parents, you know what I'm saying, that just happens. But the vast majority of black people end up getting disowned, kicked out, you know, and that's one of the main reasons why the ballroom scene is so big, because it's a bunch of people that didn't really have anywhere else to go and had chosen family, and they got together and they started doing these balls and stuff like that, and it's grown since then, right? That speaks very heavily on the experiences that will shape the trajectory of what your transition looks like. Because if you have supportive parents who are sending you to therapy and making sure that you're getting on hormones correctly, you're less likely to do like I did when I first started in my transition, which I was taking hormones legally.
Off the streets, yeah.
You know what I mean? Because I was going to therapy. I had to wait because I had to be on the sliding scale therapy because I couldn't afford hundreds of dollars per hour. And then I was experiencing medical racism and discrimination, where they just were telling me, they were giving me any reason not to give me my testosterone, and I was like, fuck it, I'm gonna just take it myself. But if I had parents that were there to support me and advocate for me, I probably wouldn't have went through that. You know what I mean? Or parents that had access to great health care or whatever the case may be. The same goes for, and you can't speak on this, but the same goes for what my pregnancies would have looked like. You know what I'm saying? If I was a white man, rather than,
imagine
you know what I
went
mean?
through, even going to the store.
Right, exactly. And I always say it the same way. Most white trans, you know, seahorse dads that you see, they have these beautiful at-home water births with a doula and a fucking midwife, and their parents are sitting there holding their hands, and they're crying when they're having their baby, and we're like tied up and looking like fucking monkeys in a zoo. You know what I'm saying? There's a lot that now are getting better care, but it's getting better a lot slower than it should. You know.
Another area I've noticed anti-blackness, most of it is in my work settings, because I think as a white man who has a trans experience that passes very well like I do, I mean, it's been easy as hell for me most of my life to get a job, aside from getting laid off in Austin and struggling with, you know, as of recently. Now I have a part-time job, but all these other years before, I could walk anywhere and get a job. And then I became a manager at a queer-friendly bar in Austin, and I was working there for a year and a half, and we hosted, you know, drag brunches, drag shows, drag bingos, you know, almost every day of the week, all the time. And so my ex, being trans, she was also a showgirl. I learned a lot there. A lot of the queens we would book were people of color, and they would tell me the horrible experiences they would have at other venues, like, you know, especially queens who were, you know, black or Mexican or anything of that nature. Like, the white queens were getting paid more, the white queens were getting more bookings, the white queens were getting more, you know, recognition, you know. And so it was really a struggle, and I really started to see how it was a real thing, because I was like, the reason y'all don't see it is because you're not actually listening to these women whenever they talk.
Right.
You're not hearing them or seeing them. You're listening to respond, because you think that this is just how the world is, but everything is, honestly, in my opinion, I don't know if maybe you can agree with this, you know, 10 years ago when I came out, I almost feel like we were safer before all this educational stuff or media stuff was out about us.
You ate that up, because yes, it did feel safer
when we were less known. But I do love all the educational content
I love the education,
about us, but there's so much toxic stuff about us.
Yeah, when I say we, I'm talking about trans men, because I don't think trans women were ever safe.
Yeah,
and that's our privilege. But I feel as though I am fine with losing some of that safety if it means being in an accomplice for trans women, or a voice for trans women. So I'm perfectly okay with that. Now let's talk about anti-blackness and the trans and queer community. We kind of touched on it, but what I specifically want to talk about is how there seems to be a general idea that, and this is just what I've seen, I'm not white, obviously, but there seems to be a general idea that if you're trans or queer, then you can't be racist because you're part of the struggle. You know what I'm saying? It's just like how trans people be like, but I'm trans, I can't be transphobic. I don't understand how so many white people feel as though they can say and do anything because they're trans and or queer.
I mean, I'll just put it like this. Growing up, I mean, I've heard lesbians use the hard R N-word. You know what I'm saying? Like, growing up, that was the kind of white people I would be around, you know? Like, it was like, I've heard, you know, lesbians be racist. I've heard trans men be racist. I've heard trans women be racist, you know? You know, I've even seen racism within different people of color, you know? And their different groups and stuff like that.
I just wonder, do you think that because they're trans or queer that they can be more loud about it?
I think they get a pass because they get to be more vulnerable and honest, maybe with their community, in the likes of their community. Especially with me, I've seen a lot of people, especially trans, gay men, even some cis straight people, start to feel like because I'm the reasonable trans person, I'm the one who doesn't shove it down people's throats. I'm the one who doesn't. I'm not the problematic one. They tend to start spilling all their opinions to me. I mean, whether they're a cis straight person or whether they're a trans man who's, you know, pretty hyper masculine or whatever, closed minded, whatever you want to call it, they fully think with, you know, all conviction they can tell me their opinions and that I will just agree no matter what. Now, I don't like to ever be a disrespectful person or rude, so I will challenge people, but I'll never make them feel embarrassed or like I'm trying to, you know, make a scene of the situation, but I'll just be like, okay, so that's an interesting perspective. Can I ask you some questions? You know, and I'll start breaking it down for them.
I feel like if a person is
putting it in different perspectives for them, you know.
I feel like if a person is overtly racist, it's absolutely okay to be disrespectful.
Like rude, yeah, no, like, for sure.
I'm not asking you no fucking questions because what the fuck did you just say to me?
I've not had a lot of like people, except like, you know, whenever I was younger. I've noticed as I get older and start to, you know, be more confident and in myself, like some men won't say certain things around me, you know, once they get to know me and who I am. You know? Now, if they have no clue about me, they might say some racist stuff, and then I could say something. But I haven't had a lot of that ever since I, you know, started passing. It's like it's once they find out I'm trans or queer, they start to think, I can ask you questions any way I want, and I can start sharing all my opinions about all these other people's identities. And I'm like, first of all, I can't speak on them. Second of all, we shouldn't talk about them.
Do you know why? Do you want to know why? It's because they see trans people as a minority, which we are. Yeah. And because trans people are a minority, they think, oh, trans, gay, bi, black, Asian, they're all minorities. I can just speak freely. You know? You must know. That's like, it's kind of like, think about diversity, equity, and inclusion spaces. People literally will think that a white cisgender lesbian is qualified to teach DE&I. And it's like, well, I mean, she's gay, so she must be diverse and like she must know all of the things. It's the way people think and look at marginalization and oppression. They think that we're all just like this one group, and they don't understand that it's like a pyramid. And there are, depending on where your intersections are, that's where you sit in in that pyramid space. And it's not a pyramid where the lines are blurred. It's like I'm either here or I'm here. I can't be here and here, if that makes sense. Like, because you are, you have cis white men, yada yada yada, and then you're like right here as a pansexual white trans man, and I'm somewhere down here as a black gay
trans man,
disabled, you know what I'm saying, all of the things. I have a fucking cornucopia, if you will, of intersection of oppression. Somebody said that on my comments. They're like, bro has all of the intersections, all the oppressions. I was like, damn. When you put it like that. But it's like, I think people just don't realize that being a part of a marginalized group, there are levels of marginalizations, there are levels of oppression. And there is a difference between marginalization and oppression. White, cis-passing trans men are probably not experiencing much oppression, if at all. Unless, no, I don't, but they're still a part of a marginalized group. Right? I think when people start understanding the differences in what the two mean, that'll be helpful. But I think that there needs to be more white people. We had this conversation. There needs to be more white people holding other white people accountable.
Well, and I think it's important to note as well that, like, me as a white trans man, right, I had to understand that basically the only transphobia I've ever experienced in my life was from people who knew me pre-transition or found me on social media and were a troll or something. I will never be, like, oppressed or someone come after me or try to harm me in any way because of the color of my skin or because of my transness, and I'm very clear on that.
Yes, and that's so important to understand, white people listening and watching. Like, you do have privilege. Do you have less privilege than somebody who's cis? Yes, but probably very slightly, especially if you're cis passing or cis assumed. Like, you have to acknowledge that. And when I say it from my black ass lips, everybody's like, well, why is everything gotta be about race? But when somebody else who's white says it, when somebody who's white says it, people are more inclined to listen. And
that's what I've learned as well, especially, like I said, having open conversations with my family, having open conversations with my friends who don't know much about anti-blackness or anti-racism or any of those things, and just being willing to ask them, why do you feel this way, but you wouldn't feel this way if it was a white person? Why?
Exactly.
Like, and not being rude, not being angry, just being like, hey, and then if you get aggressive, I'm gonna get aggressive.
We can
that's when we go.
Yes, absolutely.
Because I don't feel like, for example, there's this huge stereotype that people of color that speak out, right? Like, a lot of people that think you're angry, and you're yelling, and you're just this angry black person, right? I don't ever want to further perpetuate that, and I don't want to talk like that. And also, that's y'all's space to be angry. That's y'all's space to feel your emotions. And if I am angry, like, right. And y'all should be able to feel that because of all the historic trauma that y'all have been through. For me, I'm a white person. I'm not going to get up in arms, but I'm going to help you, I'm going to stay calm. That way I can break your mind down and help you try to really see what's going on here. Because if I start trying to fight you, then I may lose you altogether. You know?
The thing about
and I would rather try to bring them in and be like, let me teach you, and then give you the facts, give you the research, and then if you still want to be willfully ignorant, then we could just...
And see, and that also, too, is a privilege, because I will literally say the same things you say the same exact way that you say it, and I'm still aggressive.
Still seen as aggressive, right.
And it's like, but I'm just here to learn, and I'm like, but I'm teaching you. But and I always say the same thing, because I'm not fucking farting glitter and sprinkling fairy dust everywhere while I do it, because I'm not shucking and jiving for you the way that you think I should. Now I'm angry, and now you don't want to listen. But then when Joe Schmo comes and says the literal same exact thing, you're like, oh, that's so insightful. I never thought of it that way. You're like, are you fucking dead ass right now? That's how it usually goes.
And I think the sad part, like what I've seen most recently, is like all this stuff in the media about trans people, about racism and everything. 2 people just got murdered in the last month, and both of them cis, both of them black.
Yep.
And all this hate towards trans people is what fueled that.
Yes,
and it's because of the gender roles, like war.
Did you hear about the black woman that was murdered because the guy thought she was trans.
That's what I'm talking about. Yeah.
Okay,
Michelle,
I thought that's what you were talking about.
I forgot her
Yeah,
last name.
and so to sit here and act like we as trans people aren't experiencing violence, it's like, I hate that this lady had to die. Let's start there. I also want you to recognize that she died because somebody was convinced she was trans.
Because
and
she was tall. She had a deep voice.
Right, because she didn't fit into the stereotypes of what feminine or femininity should look like or what a woman should look like. This man had convinced himself that she was trans, therefore she did not deserve to live on this planet. And if you try to tell me that the current social climate didn't have anything to do with that, then you're just being willfully obtuse. And there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it, because people are killing people just because they're either trans or gay. My friend O'Shea, R.I.P. O'Shea, really sad about it, was stabbed. I'm sure you've heard about him. He was on Beyonce's website. He's been in the news. The man stabbed him in the heart because he was voguing. Because he was a gay man, and that man felt like it was an affront to his religion. And so many people on social media, behind troll accounts and behind their real accounts, honestly, are up there saying that he deserved to die. You guys have to understand that they do not see us as human beings, especially when you add that layer of blackness there. They already see black people as less than. I don't care what anybody says. And if you know anybody that says they don't see color, they see black people even as less than that. And don't be ever fooled about that. But and this is why knowing intersections and what intersectionality actually is matters. If a white man had been stabbed in the chest and died by the knife of a black man, straight man, it'd have been all over the news. The only reason why O'Shea's story got out the way it did is because he happened to be voguing to Beyonce, and Beyonce put it on her website. That's the only reason. Because days before, when it actually happened, when everybody else was saying R.I.P. O'Shea, and his best friend had to get on his platform crying in like a state of shock because he was holding his friend's, trying to keep the blood in so he wouldn't die, singing to his friend as he was passing away. When he got on live and talked about how they murdered his friend, nobody cared. But if it was a black man that I believe the man was Arab, I can't remember what his nationality was, but he was a Muslim man. He was not black, but he killed my friend who's a black man, and literally nobody cared until Beyonce said something. And we know, based off of like white woman syndrome and all that good stuff, if you're white and you get killed, the world is in mourning. You know what I mean? That's just the way that it goes. And until we can acknowledge that, I don't think there will ever be any forward movement. And so, if you're listening, I want you to do kind of a homework assignment. And your homework assignment is, and I gave you the same one, is to go through your following list and see how many black people you follow. And of the black people you follow, do you follow them because, one, you find them to be attractive and you're somehow fetishizing them in some way, or two, because they had a trauma story, right? How many black people are you following simply because you enjoy their content or they're providing you with educational material? And then look at how many white people or non-black people that you're following that provide the same. If the number of white people outweighs the number of black people, you need to sit back and ask yourself why. Am I saying you're a bad person? No. Anti-blackness, like I told you, is ingrained in all of us. We tend to find white people more palatable for conveying the same information as black people are, even when black people are conveying more information or better information. We will still run to the white person because that's what we've been taught. But if you want to learn anti-blackness, you have to start sitting with the uncomfortable feelings. So Casey has begun using his platform to talk about his experiences as a white trans man, and dealing with and navigating anti-blackness and unlearning all of the things that we've been talking about today. So let the people know where they can find you at.
So it's at Slim Casey, and my name is spelled Kasi. So SLIMKASI on Threads, TikTok, Instagram, and then you can also follow my business account at Queer Traditions on Instagram and TikTok.
And go buy a shirt.
Yep, at queertraditions.com.
Yep, go make sure you buy a shirt. I'll make sure I link all of that stuff.
The artist will get commission. My current artist right now is Jalen at Warmth of the Sun Tattoo on Instagram.
Yup. So make sure you guys give Casey a follow. We love new information. We love invaluable information. And sometimes it's just good to hear things from a different perspective. I don't think there's enough white people getting on these social media apps and actually
being honest. Like being honest about what they observe.
Right? Yeah, being honest,
not
about
observing, not even paying attention.
Right. Or and like really talking about like the uncomfortable things without worrying about being also palatable for white people. As per usual, please interact with this podcast episode. If you enjoyed it, let me know. Just taking the poll isn't enough because I can't see your username that way. I need you to comment, let me know what you think, and you may get a shout out next week. Did you have anything else you wanted to say? Anything you wanted to leave the people with?
So I would just like to leave y'all with, please just take the time to, if you see someone who has lived a different experience than you, whether that person is trans, a person of color, queer person, if you see someone who has very much lived a different life experience than you, ask them about their history, how they came about, find out about their life. I think that's some of the most important things to understand with what we're dealing with right now, with racism, with internalized transphobia that I still experience, internalized homophobia that I still experience. I have to be willing to have uncomfortable conversations and start talking to people with different experiences if I want to learn why I have those belief systems. Hopefully that makes sense.
Yes, that makes sense. And also I think it's important to do those things just so that you can humanize people beyond what has been ingrained in you that might teach you to avoid those people or think of those people as less than without even realizing that you're doing that.
Yeah, and this is something Skylar Baylor talks about on his podcast, Dear Skylar, how he tries to take himself out of, his humanity out of it. Whenever he feels offended or feels those transphobic, homophobic, or racist thoughts coming up, he's like, I need to take myself out of this because it's not about me.
Right.
And then look at the situation for what it really is without my own emotions. It's like being neutral and having uncomfortable conversations is how we're going to change the world, honestly.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. So I thought this was a great episode. Again, if you agree, drop a damn heart or something, y'all. Hello? And again, I will shout you out. I'm actually about to start dropping episodes every week, so you're gonna want to get your name out there.
Yeah,
and when you drop your drop your comment, add your social media handle so I can follow you or tell other people to follow you. Let's support each one, teach one. All right. So. Thank you all for listening. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Make sure you follow me on all social media platforms. I can't speak. At CadenXOfficial. That's Instagram, Facebook, which I'm probably not going to be on. Threads and TikTok. We're not on Twitter. Yeah. Thanks again. Have the day you deserve.
Thank you.